Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little unexpected. A warm loaf of bread, a chilly stone floor, and the mild existential dread that your breakfast could land you in jail. You're not some master chef or artisan baker. You're just a tired soul waking up before dawn, surrounded by flour sacks, wood smoke, and the gentle snores of two apprentices snoring on a pile of grain sacks. The air smells faintly of yeast fire and regret. Welcome to your life in a medieval bakehouse. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this career with all your fingers. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice, besides the rat nibbling on a crust near your ankle, is how cold it is. Medieval bakeries don't come with central heating. The only warmth comes from yesterday's embers, buried beneath a blackened dome of brick. You reach for your tunic, stiff with yesterday's sweat and flour paste, and sit up slowly, brushing off crumbs from your straw bed, which by the way is also the kneading bench. Welcome to job security by way of chronic back pain. You trudge across the floor, toes numb against flagstone to coax the oven back to life. The great mouth of the bake oven yawns before you still warm but not hot enough. Time to chop wood. Again. Because you forgot to restock it last night, and your master baker is already stirring. He'll grumble about the heat and then about your posture and eventually about your soul. This is your morning. Every morning, in a world where most people are hungry, bread isn't just food. It's survival, it's religion, and it's politics. And you lucky apprentice are stuck smack in the middle of it all. The flour bin groans when you lift the lid. You reach in fingers sifting through the coarse grind. Not white flour, of course. That's for the nobles and churchmen with golden chalices and uncalloused hands. This is rough ground rye and barley greyish, slightly sour smelling sometimes with bonus weevils. You pick one out, toss it back in. What's one more? A few scoops into the bowl, a handful of cracked salt and water from the pail by the door. Don't ask what's floating in it, and you start mixing. The dough is sticky, stubborn and ungrateful, much like your boss. There's no recipe book, just memory muscle and the ever-present fear of being dragged before the town steward for suspicious density. See, in this world, bread isn't about fluffiness or crust appeal. It's about weight, literally. Every loaf must match a standard set by a law older than your teeth. Bake it too light and you're cheating your customers. Too heavy and you're wasting grain, a sacred crime. Either way, you're toast. Historians still argue whether bakers were the most regulated profession in medieval Europe, or just the most scapegoated. Probably both. What's certain is that your job comes with its own legal drama. Every morning before sales begin, a loaf must be broken open. Not just cut tasted. By you. In front of a witness. That's called assaying the bread. And it's not optional. It's an oath. If the bread is bad, if the flour is off, if there's God forbid chalk in the crust, you're liable. And not just with your reputation, with your body. Because in the Middle Ages, baking isn't about passion. It's about obligation. You're not the village favourite with sourdough tips and a cosy blog. You're a potential criminal holding a ladle. And people are watching. The town reeve might drop in unannounced. He'll bring a set of scales and a notebook that smells like goat. He'll weigh your loaves, poke the crusts, maybe nibble a corner with the same enthusiasm one reserves for chewing old boots. If anything's off, he'll issue a fine, or worse. You could be thrown into the pillory for public shaming where children will pelt you with stale rolls. That's not a metaphor, that's your career risk. But you're used to it by now. The mix of pressure and pottage, the sound of dough slapping wood, the creak of the rising paddle, the hush before sunrise as the fire licks the dome, and the air fills with the promise of something warm and temporary. It's almost peaceful if you ignore the occasional rat war under the grain sacks. Your master peers over your shoulder, yawns, scratches something unmentionable, and then nods. Let it prove, he mutters, rubbing soot from his brow. You both know the real proving happens later under the eye of the bread jury, the market ladies, and every toothless gossip in the town square. As the sun rises, the bread begins to rise too. Slow, uneven, with little puffs of promise, you tuck it in with a cloth like a nervous parent. Outside, the crier's bell rings. Soon the streets will fill with people, peasants with pennies, clergy with expectations, children with sticky fingers, and each one will judge you by their bite. You line the loaves on a wooden board, each one slightly different despite your best efforts. One's a bit lopsided, one looks like it sat too close to the fire. You pray no one notices, but someone always does. A fly lands on the crust. You swat it. Miss. The fly lives another day. Maybe it's under oath too. And just before you carry the tray to market, you pause, break off a corner, chew slowly. It's dry, chewy, faintly nutty with a hint of wood smoke and failure. Could be worse. Could be chalkier. You nod. You swallow. You survive. For now. You shoulder the wooden tray, its weight pressing awkwardly against your ribs, and step out into the chilly grey morning. The streets of your medieval town are still half asleep. Just a few dogs, a cluster of women clanging buckets at the well, and one monk muttering into his beard. But soon the air will swell with noise footsteps and the sound of bargains being bartered over bruised turnips and questionable eels. Your bakery's stone threshold gives a familiar creak as you cross it. Loaves. Carefully balanced like you're carrying a basket of dynamite. A few are already cooling their rough crusts, letting off faint streams of warmth that curl into the air like prayers. You glance up at the church spire, tall, pious, and silently judging your crumb structure. The grind never stops. And we mean that in the most literal sense. The flour you kneaded into dough this morning didn't just appear. No sacks from bulk warehouses, no bags with smiling windmills stamped on the side. No, in your world, the flour starts with stone. And that's where the mill comes in. Grain milling in the Middle Ages is backbreaking, wind-dependent, and deeply political. Local lords often own the only working mill within miles, and peasants are legally bound to use it. That's right. If you try to grind your own grain using, say, 2 heavy rocks in your basement, you're not just being thrifty, you're breaking the law. The punishment, confiscation, fines, or the charmingly medieval option of getting tied to a post and publicly reminded why your lord deserves your loyalty. You remember this as you pass the old mill on the riverbank. The wheel creaks as it turns sluggish today. Not enough current. Inside, the miller is already red-faced and grumbling, covered in a fine white sheen like a ghost who's just sneezed. Historians still argue whether medieval millers were the most corrupt figures in village life, or simply the most resented. Either way, your relationship with the miller is complicated. You bring him grain, wheat, barley, or rye, depending on what your master baker bought at the market. He grinds it, takes his mulcher, a mandatory cut, and gives you the flour back. Sometimes you swear he gives you less than you deserve. Sometimes you know he does. But if you complain, he'll accidentally spill your next batch into the river, the flour itself. It's a gamble. Some batches smell sweet, others like old boots. You once got a sack full of flour laced with ground up peas. Not because it was trendy, because someone was cutting corners. You still remember the taste, and the complaints, and the one customer who claimed his wife fainted mid-loaf. Back at the bakery, your master's already preparing the sponge, the bubbling pre-dough that gives the bread its rise. It smells vaguely sour, slightly alive, and like it has opinions. You sweep the floor, stir the fire, and prepare for your second batch of dough. The grind continues. There's no such thing as idle time. Your hands are always busy. If not kneading, then scrubbing. If not scrubbing, then hauling. If not hauling, then praying. You don't get accused of light loafing, a term as hilarious as it is deadly serious. Because here's the thing, bread was one of the few foods everybody ate. Rich or poor, pious or profane, everyone needed their daily loaf. That meant every baker's mistake was everyone's business. You think of last year when old Will from across the square baked a batch of loaves that weighed in under the legal minimum. He swore it was the humidity. The steward didn't care. Will spent the afternoon in the stocks loaves dangling from his ears on a string while children pelted him with cabbages. He's still bitter, a missing part of one ear. Sometimes if you're short on flour, you get creative or desperate. A sprinkle of bran, a scoop of mashed beans, even crushed eggshells, all to stretch the dough. Some even mix in chalk. Yes, actual chalk. It gives the bread a lovely white colour and an even lovelier crunch. But if you're caught, the consequences range from fines to flogging. Or worse, being banned from the Bakers' Guild, which in this town is a fate worse than starvation. You'd think all this risk would come with high pay. Think again. Bakers aren't nobles. You don't ride horses. You ride exhaustion. You live in the bakery or near it. Sleep in the rafters, eat yesterday's scraps, and dream of one day owning a bakery of your own, which mostly means dreaming of your own. Apprentice to boss around. Still there's a rhythm to it. A comfort in the repetition. Mix, knead, rest, bake, sell, sweep, repeat. It's not glamorous, but at least it's honest. Mostly. The loaves you brought to market are now lined up on a wooden cart angled for maximum visibility. Each one is marked with your bakery's official symbol, across a star, a simple twist of rope. That mark proves they're yours. If a loaf goes missing and turns up underweight, the inspector knows exactly who to chase with the official bread tongs. Speaking of which, here he comes. Topham, the town's breadweigher, a man with a face like a week-old crust and a personality to match. He saunters over, takes a loaf, sets it on his scale and squints. You wait. He nods. You breathe. He moves on. No stocks today. But it's not just about passing the test. It's about feeding people. An elderly woman selects a smaller loaf, sniffs it and nods. A boy with dirt on his face clutches a warm roll like it's treasure. A monk mutters a blessing over a barley round before biting in with visible suspicion. In this town, bread is more than bread. It's trust. And today your loaves pass. They fill bellies, satisfy monks and earn you a few coins, plus a leftover crust you'll nibble on while sweeping the ash from the hearth later tonight. As the sun arcs overhead, you glance down at your hands, calloused, cracked, coated in dried dough. Hands that shape food risk punishment and carry more weight than most realise. You head back to the bakery, already planning tomorrow's mix. The grind never stops, but neither do you. You return to the bakery just as the afternoon settles in like an old wool blanket, thick, itchy and filled with regret. The air inside is even warmer than outside, saturated with the lingering aroma of yeast ash and the unmistakable scent of someone forgetting to clean under the dough bench. The fire from the morning batch still crackles faintly, like it's muttering old gossip to itself, and the sun casts a sleepy amber hue across the flour-dusted floorboards. Your master baker doesn't look up as you enter. He's focused on a tray of loaves, poking each one like a skeptical midwife. "This flour's coarse," he mutters, like chewing gravel with a side of insult. You nod. That's not unusual. Today's flour came from the northern mill, the one that runs its grindstones too fast and too hot. You swear you can still hear the groaning of the wheel in your bones. And let's be honest, the quality depends as much on wind speed and luck as it does on the mood of the miller. And that man hasn't smiled since the last crusade. You roll up your sleeves and plunge your hands into the bin of flour. It's rough, uneven and speckled with tiny black flecks, maybe from the grain, maybe from the miller's beard. You sift and stir, blending it with a handful of cracked salt and a pail of water so dubious you whisper a prayer before pouring it in. Then comes the work kneading. No machines, no dough hooks, just you, your elbows and an aching back. The dough fights you, resists. It sticks, stretches, slaps back. A living thing, angry and glutinous, this isn't your first batch today, or even your third, and it won't be your last. Because in a medieval bakery, time doesn't follow the sun, it follows the loaves. As long as someone's hungry, which is always, your hands are never still. But let's pause here just for a second and talk about something no one really considers anymore. The bread ladder. Yes, that's right, the bread hierarchy. The deliciously depressing system of loaves ranked by flour, quality, bake time and social class. You're not just baking food, you're baking status. At the very top of the medieval bread ladder is the legendary manchet. Soft, white, delicate. Made with fine flour, sifted through cloth so many times it's practically silk. It's tender, light, and about as accessible to you as a personal unicorn. This bread is reserved for nobles, bishops, and anyone who can spell inheritance. It's served at feasts, carried on silver trays, and devoured by people who think gout is a sign of refinement. You've made it, yes, but only under supervision. You've never tasted it warm. Maybe a crumb once, from the edge, after it fell on the floor. Next, wrung down Revel bread. Still light, still respectable. Slightly less refined, slightly more chew. This is the bread for wealthy merchants' retired knights, and that one suspiciously well-fed monk who claims fasting builds character. You bake Ravel bread for local officials when they visit. You slice it carefully, trying not to let them see the envy in your eyes. Then comes Simnel bread, denser, darker, and often disguised as a gift when no one can afford the good stuff. It's not bad, just honest, practical, eaten by scribes, minor clergy and middle-aged widows who remember better bread from their childhood. And then comes Maslin. Maslin bread is your everyday fare. A brutal combination of rye, barley, oats, sometimes wheat if the harvest was good, and occasionally creative ingredients. Ground legumes, cracked peas, that handful of chaff you accidentally dropped in the bin but pretended not to notice. It's not pretty, it's not elegant, but it's what most people eat and what your bakery specialises in. You knead it with calloused hands, shape it into heavy rounds, and pray that it bakes through evenly so no one accuses you of short-weighting the loaf. And finally, at the dusty bottom of the hierarchy is horse bread. No, it's not made of horse, but it's for horses and the desperate. A mix of ground beans, bran and sometimes straw, baked into discs so tough they can double as roof tiles in emergencies. You've bitten into it once on a dare. You almost lost a molar. Still you hear stories of peasants boiling it into stew. You're not sure whether that softens the bread or just makes the water sad. Historians still debate whether Maslin bread was a deliberate punishment for the poor or simply the best that could be made with what was available. Some argue it was nutritious, a slow-release mix of grain that kept you full. Others point out that it was often mouldy, bug-ridden, and occasionally laced with ergot, a fungus that causes hallucinations, convulsions, and in one infamous case, a dancing plague. But you don't have time to worry about fungal infestations. You have 42 loaves to shape before the sun sets, and one splinter in your thumb that's starting to turn an interesting shade of purple. You finish forming the loaves, stack them onto boards and slide them toward the oven. Not directly in, of course. That's where the peel comes in, a long wooden paddle used to place the loaves deep in the oven's glowing mouth. One wrong angle and your precious dough hits the hot brick too fast, burning before it rises. You've done it before. The smell of shame lingers for days. You lean on the bench, watching the loaves puff slowly, their edges turning golden. You reach for one of the day's earlier bakes. Break it open, tear off a piece, chew. It's warm, coarse, a little chewy. Not bad, no chalk, no grit. Just good, honest bread. You nod. Another batch passes the taste test. Because yes, you have to taste it. That's not just baker's pride, it's the law. In most towns, bakers are legally required to sample their own bread before it reaches a customer's mouth. Why? Because if someone gets sick from your loaf, it's assumed you tasted it too and will suffer the same fate. The law is called the Assize of bread. We'll get to its madness later. For now, just know this. If your bread is off, the steward won't care about your excuses. You'll be fined, flogged, or flung in the stocks, publicly shamed with a sign around your neck that says something like, "This man sold a light loaf. It's less than ideal." But your master nods as he inspects the latest tray. The crust is tight, the crumbs solid. You've survived another bake, and no one's bleeding. That's a win. You clean up the bench flour everywhere, sticky lumps of dough in the corners, a tiny pile of raisins someone dropped yesterday. You eat one, probably fine. As the sky darkens and the shutters creak shut, you slump beside the oven. You've got ash in your eyebrows and dough under your nails. Your arms ache, your knees protest. But the loaves are baked, the bins are cleaned, and your master hasn't thrown anything at you all day. You call that success. You chew on a crust, dry but warm. You close your eyes, let the fire crackle, and somewhere far away you imagine biting into manchette bread. Just once, just one perfect white buttery slice, maybe tomorrow. You awake the next morning to the smell of smoke and something dangerously close to burning. Not bread yet, but close. Someone must have restarted the oven too early or tossed in wet wood again. You sit up from your straw pile, cough into your sleeve, and immediately regret moving. Every part of you aches. Your hands are stiff, your back crackles, and your legs feel like you've been kicked by a horse made of bricks. Congratulations, you're a medieval baker. You shuffle toward the mixing bench where the first batch of dough is already slumped in the bowl, rising slowly like a bloated toad. The flour is better today, less gritty, no weevil so far, and the water isn't green, which is always a nice surprise. But you're not in a rush. Because today isn't just another baking day. Today is rent day, which means one very specific thing. The town reeve is about to walk through your door, clipboard in one hand, scowl in the other, ready to inspect your loaves and maybe, just maybe, demand a rent payment in the form of your best bread. See, money isn't exactly overflowing in medieval towns. Coins are rare. Most people barter. A chicken for a basket of apples, 2 candles for a haircut, and sometimes, especially when taxes come, due bread is currency. Real dense flour and salt legal tender. That's why when the landlord or tax collector comes knocking you hand over loaves, not out of kindness, out of necessity. And it's not just taxes. Bread gets traded for nearly everything. Tools, firewood, eggs, gossip, even favours from the parish clerk who can forget you missed morning mass. You once paid a travelling tinker for knife sharpening with a week-old loaf and a joke about the bishop's gout. He laughed, took the bread, called it even. There's even a name for this kind of non-monetary exchange in kind payment. You're not rich, you're well stocked. And if you're clever, your bakery becomes more than a business. It becomes a barter hub. People don't just come to buy, they come to trade. A woman drops off a jug of ale in exchange for a cheese loaf. A farmer swaps eggs for morning rolls. The baker down the lane trades you 3 burnt barley buns for a scoop of your better flour. It's like a weird game of medieval Monopoly, only instead of hotels you're managing turnips and instead of jail you get the stocks. Historians still debate how common this kind of loaf-based economy was across Europe. In market towns, coinage circulated more freely, but in smaller villages bread became a social glue. It was visible, tangible, essential, and it didn't spoil quite as fast as gossip. And oh, the gossip! You overhear everything at the bake stall. Who's marrying who? Who got caught poaching rabbits? Who's skipping their tithe? All while tearing off pieces of warm crust and pretending to count change. Bread isn't just sustenance, it's surveillance. You learn to listen while needing to nod while pretending to be deaf, and to laugh at the right jokes even when your brain is screaming. Focus on the fire. You remember one spring when a customer tried to pay with a loaf of someone else's bread. You recognise the mark, a twisted knot baked into the top. Belonged to the widow's son on the east end of town. You handed it back with a smile and a nice try. The man turned redder than the coals in the oven. The next day he paid in cabbages and didn't look you in the eye. But there's another quieter way bread becomes a kind of currency, not with trade, with trust. When a neighbour falls sick, you leave a loaf on their doorstep. When someone dies, you bake for the family. When a child is born, a sweet roll, if sugar can be spared, is delivered with warm congratulations and an awkward grin. No one asks for these things. They're expected, a kind of soft social debt. And when your turn comes, when you're short on flour or time or health, someone returns the favour. Usually, you once burned your arm pretty badly. No doctor, of course, just a cloth soaked in vinegar and a prayer. But while you were out, 3 neighbours brought flour, stoked your fire, and helped the apprentice shape the loaves. They even sold a few at market, said you owed them nothing, but you baked them a sweet bread each the next week, because bread carries memory and obligation. The reeve arrives just after midday as expected, with his sour face and even sourer breath. He sniffs the air pokes at a loaf, then lifts one of your lighter maslins. You hold your breath. He weighs it, frowns, then shrugs. Passable, he grunts before grabbing 2 of your best for inspection, aka dinner. You bow. He leaves. You exhale. Rent day survived. But the day isn't done, because next the parish cook arrives. She's here for the church's weekly bread order, communion loaves, and those are not your average rounders. Church bread is sacred, symbolic, fussy, and weirdly kind of terrifying. Because now your baking isn't just judged by its weight or crumb, it's judged by theology. It has to be pure, unleavened, clean. Any cracks, bubbles, or overbakes could be interpreted as, you guessed it, a sign of sin. No pressure. You form the little round, slowly hand steady, trying not to imagine the priest raising your loaf over his head next Sunday, only to frown mid-sermon and mutter, "Who baked this?" Still, when it comes out of the oven, golden smooth and crack-free, you feel something. Not pride, not joy, just relief. Because in this world, every loaf is a test of your hands, your honesty, your place in the community. You send off the church bread, wrap up the remaining loaves for evening trade, and finally allow yourself a minute. 1 whole minute to sit by the window, look out at the slow drift of smoke over thatched roofs and think, this is your life. It's not easy. It's not grand. But it matters. You rise, brush flour off your knees and return to the bench. Tomorrow there will be more loaves, more barters, more inspections, and inevitably more burnt crusts and complaints about the good old days when bread didn't taste like dust. But tonight you sleep with full shelves, clean hands, and just enough coin to buy a candle for the apprentice's birthday. And that in this crumb-covered world is something close to peace. The morning begins just like the last finger's numb eyes, grainy breath fogging in the cold air that clings to the inside of the bakehouse walls like old secrets. The coals from last night's fire still pulse faintly beneath the ash, warm but fading like a whisper of yesterday. You stir them back to life with a poker that doubles as a walking stick when your back gives out. Another day, another gamble with flour and fire. But today something new appears nailed to the side of your bakery's wooden lintel. A scrap of parchment sealed with wax and scribbled in ink that looks like it was bled from a cranky goose. You squint at it. You already know what it is. It's the baker's oath, again. They post it once a season, sometimes more, depending on whether someone in town tried to pass off a turnip loaf as wheat bread. The parchment reads like scripture for your profession, a solemn promise to the town, the guild, the crown, and the Lord Almighty himself. You will not cheat. You will not steal. You will not dilute the dough with chalk bone dust or mashed peas. You will not mismeasure, underbake, overbake, or shortway. You will not bake loaves that crumble, collapse, or contain more mouse than meal. You take a deep breath. You've sworn this oath before, in public no less, standing in the square with a loaf in one hand and your other hand raised like you're calling on heaven to witness your flour ratio. The town steward recited each line aloud and you echoed it with all the gravitas you could muster while sweating through your only tunic. The townspeople watched. So did the reeve, and most disturbingly, so did your competitors. It might seem excessive. After all, it's just bread, right? No. It's not just bread. Not here. Not now. In a world where famine is always one bad harvest away, and bread is the backbone of every meal, every household, every sermon, every soldier's ration, your role is practically sacred. You're not just baking food, you're feeding faith, order and survival. And breaking the baker's oath is more than a breach of trust. It's a crime. If you're caught violating the oath, if your loaves are underweight, your flour too coarse, or your batch is somehow unwholesome, you're hauled in front of the town court, fined heavily and paraded through the streets, with your shame baked right into your punishment. Literally. There's a custom, especially in your part of the kingdom, where dishonest bakers must carry their faulty loaves strung around their necks like a garland of disgrace. It's not elegant, but it's effective. The townspeople call it their necklace of lies. You've seen it once. A baker named Edwin, older than you, hands always shaking, tried to pass off a dozen light loaves by fluffing them up with ground chickpeas. The bread looked fine, beautiful even, but it crumbled at the first bite. The town breadweigher caught it. Edwin was stripped of his guild privileges for a season. More painfully, he had to walk the entire market square with his evidence hanging from a rope bouncing against his chest like a bell of betrayal. Children laughed. Women stared. One monk crossed himself, and no one bought from him for months. Edwin sold onions after that. Said they never betrayed him. You have no intention of becoming an onion merchant. The oath also requires that you sample your own bread every single batch every single day. Not just a nibble, but a visible, chewable, swallowable bite. Why? Because if your customer eats something that turns their stomach inside out and you didn't taste it yourself, that's an admission of guilt. It proves you didn't follow the oath, didn't care enough to check, didn't suffer with them. So you taste. Always. You tear off a warm corner of a fresh loaf, let the crust crack beneath your fingers and chew slowly. You let the taste spread across your tongue, the grit, the salt, the slight tang from the long fermentation. Is it good? Not always. Is it honest? That's what matters. Your apprentice watches you with wide eyes. He's new, still thinks baking is about the scent of rising dough and the poetry of ash. You don't want to ruin it for him yet. Always taste, you say, even if it burns your mouth. Especially then. But if I know it's bad, especially then. You don't just take the oath for the customers, you take it for yourself, for the bread, for the trade, for the thousands of bakers who came before you and swore the same lines with the same cracked lips and dough-stiffened hands. And yes, the punishment can get worse. Some towns are known to put offending bakers in the pillory, that charming device, where your head and arms stick out of wooden stocks while passers-by toss week-old loaves, eggs and worse. It's not uncommon for someone to shout, "Feed us something better next time," while pelting you with your own failed product. The irony, you're still required to provide that product. The official record must include the offending loaf. It becomes evidence. The court calls it Exhibit Crumb. Some towns even maintain a baker's book of offence where every infraction is noted beside your name, not in ink, in soot. Smudged heavy strokes that never truly fade. You've seen the book. Your master showed it to you once when you were first apprenticed. This, he said, is where names go to die. Still you keep baking, because someone has to. Historians debate whether the baker's oath was more symbolic than practical. Some say it was meant to scare bakers into compliance. Others believe it truly helped prevent famine by discouraging fraud. But in truth, the oath wasn't about you. It was about them. The townspeople, the clergy, the children, the beggars, everyone who can't afford a mistake in their daily bread. You're in a strange way the custodian of their health. So when the flour arrives damp, you dry it. When the fire burns uneven, you adjust the loaves mid-bake. When the rain soaks the wood, you use more fuel even if it cost you sleep, because you swore. Your master adds his signature to today's batch record. Just a scratch of ink beside the line labelled "Witness to Quality." You add yours underneath. That counts too. You're not just a boy with a paddle and a sore back anymore. You're a baker, a sworn one. The loaves go out to the stall. People arrive slowly at first. The widow, the brewer's boy, a priest who always claims he's fasting but somehow eats half a round by noon. They sniff prod pay or trade, and no one accuses you today. No one turns up their nose. It's a good day. You close the shutters at sunset, light a tallow candle, you taste the last loaf, just to be sure. Still warm, still right, still sworn. The morning air hangs thick with soot and yeast. You blink yourself awake beneath a crusty wool blanket that smells like old dough and damp wood. Outside, the cock has already crowed twice, and inside the oven is just beginning to exhale its first sigh of heat. You groan, stretch, and immediately regret both actions. Your muscles feel like they've been kneaded harder than yesterday's rye batch. You roll off your straw mat and land barefoot on cold stone. Another day begins. You shuffle over to the fire pit and poke the coals. The embers blink at you like sleepy eyes. You toss on more wood, coaxing flame from ash smoke from memory. The oven must be hot enough before sunrise, or else the bread won't be ready for the morning buyers, especially the reeve who insists on arriving before the devil stirs his porridge, whatever that means. Today you're not alone in your early wakefulness. A knock rattles the bakery's side door. You open it to find a pale, nervous boy standing there holding a small wooden board. On it is a loaf, a very flat, very black, very sad-looking loaf. My master says, "Could you take a look?" Ah, a burn case. You examine the bread. It's cracked uneven with a crust that could crack a church window. You break off a piece. It's dry as ash, bitter from smoke. You nod solemnly. Too hot, too soon, you say. Didn't let the dome settle. The boy stares. You hand him back the loaf like a doctor returning an unclaimed limb. He bows and flees. This too is part of the job informal consultation. Bakers advising bakers, because nobody wants to end up in the pillory, especially not over a loaf like that. And oh, the pillory! It sits in the centre of the market square, always watching. 2 wooden arms, a hinged plank for your head and hands, and a wide enough berth for crowds to gather and throw things. Officially it's for criminals, thieves, liars, swindlers, but also bakers. Not every day, not even every week. But it happens. Bake a light loaf underweight and the fine is bad. But repeat the offence or be found guilty of deliberate deception, and you're marched straight to that timbered stage of shame. A few years ago, a baker named Hallam got dragged up there. He'd sold a batch of oat loaves that weighed less than the legal minimum set by the dreaded Assize of bread and ale, which, if you haven't heard yet, is the medieval equivalent of the FDA, the IRS, and your least favourite in-law, all rolled into one terrifying law. Hallam claimed it was a bad scale. The reeve said otherwise. Hallam claimed the flour was damp. The steward said it was greed. Hallam claimed he was framed. The court said, to the pillory. So there he stood, arms and head locked in place while the townsfolk took their turns. Some threw scraps, others tossed insults. One man lobbed a potato so old it had started to sprout a second life. And when the punishment ended, Hallam didn't return to baking. He moved to fishmongering, said the shame clung worse than fish guts. The lesson was clear: bake it right or pay the price. Historians still debate how common these punishments were. Some argue they were symbolic, used to make examples out of the few so the many would fall in line. Others believe the town courts relished the spectacle, especially when the offender was someone unpopular. Either way, the message was loud: dishonesty in bread wasn't just culinary, it was civic treason. But here's the kicker. Sometimes even honest bakers got punished. The rules around bread weren't just strict, they were slippery. The Assize wasn't a one-size-fits-all system. It adjusted for market prices, flour quality and grain supply. Each week the town would post new standards: how much a loaf should weigh, what it should cost, how many ounces of flour per penny's worth of bread. It was math. Complex, cruel math. And if you miscalculated, if your flour was clumpy, or your oven ran hot, or your dough didn't rise the way it should because the yeast had sulked, too bad. You were still responsible. That's why most bakers practiced a trick known as the vantage loaf. You bake a little extra into every batch, just a few ounces here and there, enough to make sure no loaf ever weighs under the requirement. It's your safety net, your insurance, your edible apology in case the steward decides to double check. Some towns even required it by law. If the rule said 12 loaves per batch, you made 13. That 13th loaf, called the inbread or baker's dozen, wasn't a bonus, it was protection. It went to the inspector, the reeve, or was donated to the church as a silent bribe to St. Honoré, patron of bakers, and those trying to dodge the stocks. You pull out your next tray of loaves, tap each one, crisp crust, firm bottom. You weigh 2 at random, slightly over. Good. The vantage loaf has done its job, but even the best precautions can fail. You remember one winter when the flour came in frozen solid? It clumped in the bins, wouldn't mix properly and baked up lumpy and pale. Half the town complained. One man claimed it gave his daughter a toothache so severe she couldn't speak for 3 days. You apologised, reweighed your flour, baked longer. Still the steward showed up. No pillory, he said, but a fine. 2 shillings. You didn't have 2 shillings, so you paid in bread, 20 loaves. Good ones too. That week your own family ate crusts and scraps. You boiled water with turnip peelings and pretended it was stew. The fine hurt, but not as much as the shame. You've never made that mistake again. Today you feel the balance in your body, the rhythm of the dough, the fire, the shaping, the scoring. You've reached a point where your hands know the weight without the scale. Your fingers know the moisture without measuring. It's part science, part prayer, part muscle memory. But the fear, it never quite goes away. Because in this world, one bad loaf can undo months of good ones. One flat batch can flatten your entire reputation. One puffed up crust can pop your standing in the guild. So you keep watch, keep tasting, keep checking. The apprentice places another board of shaped dough on the rack. You think these will pass inspection, he asks. You shrug. They'll do. Think they'll like the crust, doesn't matter. He blinks. What matters then? You pause, look at the loaves, then back at him. That no one throws them at you. Because in the end, the job isn't about perfection. It's about survival. By midday, the bakery is a sweltering haze of smoke, steam, and barely restrained panic. You've got 3 batches rising, 2 loaves burning, and an apprentice who just asked if he could make a fun, twisty loaf for the market children. You tell him no so firmly that his eyebrows retreat behind his flour-dusted bangs. He scurries back to cleaning the peel. You didn't mean to bark, but the flour shipment is late, the fire's running uneven, and you're staring down an empty barrel of your finest ground wheat. This is when the temptation creeps in. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly like a trickle of muddy water under the door after a heavy rain. You eye the corner shelf. That one bag. It's not flour, not really. It's sawdust. Fine, dry, and technically edible if you squint at the definition of edible, and don't mind the idea of eating something that used to be part of a chair. You've seen others do it. Add just a pinch to stretch the flour, not to replace it, never entirely. Just to make the dough go a little further, to meet the quotas, to bake the day's worth without cutting someone's portion short, or their wages, or their already razor-thin patience. It's called extending the batch, and it's a whispered secret among desperate bakers across the kingdom. No one admits to it, no one brags about it, but everyone knows it happens, especially when the grain wagons are delayed and the mills shut for repairs because the water wheel got jammed with frozen geese again. Yes, that happened last winter. No, no one talks about it. You're not proud, but you're also not a magician. You can't make loaves out of nothing. You stir your current bowl of dough, it's thin, slack, refusing to rise with the enthusiasm you need. You could add more flour if you had it, which you don't. This is the moment. This is when the real decision gets made, not by logic, but by hunger. Not yours, but your customers. It's hard to forget their faces. The older woman who buys 2 half loaves every week and carries them home under her apron like fragile eggs. The carpenter's boy with cheeks always smudged and hands always empty, who gives you a pebble or feather in trade. The priest's maid who pretends she's buying for the church but always sneaks an extra roll into her pocket for someone she won't name. You feed them. You feed everyone. And if your shelves are empty, their bellies are too. So the shortcut doesn't feel like cheating at first. It feels like survival. That's how it starts. Just a pinch. You reach for the sawdust, and then you hear it. Your master's voice, calm, flat final from the other room. Don't. You freeze. I've seen that look before, he says. It always ends the same way. You don't respond, just keep your hand hovering. He steps into view, wiping his hands on a rag so stained it looks like it's seen 3 wars. He doesn't yell. He doesn't scold. He just tells a story. When I was your age, he begins, because of course he does. I ran the oven during the famine of '86. We had no wheat. The rye was mouldy. The barley bugs. You nod. You've heard bits of this before, so I added a little sawdust. Not a lot. Just enough to pad out the maslin. Thought I was clever. Thought I was careful. He pauses. It worked. No one noticed. For a day. You raise an eyebrow. 2nd day a child chipped a tooth. 3rd day the reeve himself stopped by. Took 1 bite. Asked what that strange flavour was. He leans in just slightly. I said it was ash. He said it tasted like trees. You try not to smile. He fined me. Not just coins. He made me eat my entire batch. Said, if it's good enough for us, it's good enough for you. What happened, you ask quietly. I ate it, he says. I got sick. Not from poison. From shame. He turns and leaves. Bake less if you must, he calls back. But never lie. You stare at the sawdust. At the dough. At your hands. Then you sweep the sawdust back into its sack and tie it shut. You mix the batch thinner, knead it longer, shape the loaves smaller. You'll sell them for a bit less. Or offer 2 for 1 if someone really needs them. You'll explain the flour was short. Most folks will understand. The rest, let them try buying from the next town over. They'll come back. Because your bread may be humble, but it's honest. But not every baker makes the same choice. There are tales always told in hushed tones and over bitter ale about those who pushed too far. One in particular, a baker named Mathilde in the southern quarter. Clever, fast, proud of her crusts. She started with sawdust, then switched to clay, claimed it added earthy flavour, then came chalk. Ground fine, it made loaves look whiter, more refined, more expensive. It worked, for a while. Then one of her customers broke a molar on a pebble embedded in the crumb, complained, reported it. Matilda denied it. The reeve didn't care. They dragged her before the court, read her the baker's oath aloud, asked her to swear she had followed it. She did. Then they brought out her test loaf, the one she hadn't tasted, cracked it in half. Dust and lies spilled out. Her punishment. 3 days in the pillory, wearing a rope of loaves strung around her like a necklace of shame. One child threw a rotten onion, another threw her own bread back at her. After that, Matilda left. Some say she moved to the coast. Others say she started selling fish. You think about her sometimes, because the temptation never truly goes away, especially not now. With prices rising, grain stores dwindling, and the market crowd growing more impatient with every sunset. Your apprentice returns. Bread's ready, he says. You nod, take a loaf, tear it open. The crumb is good, coarse but warm. The crust crackles. You hand him a piece. He chews, nods, then whispers, "Did we add the—" "No," you interrupt. He swallows, smiles. "Good." You carry the tray to the front stall, line the loaves just so. Smaller than usual, yes, but beautiful. The smell drifts out onto the street. A child passes by, sniffs, stops, smiles. You smile back. No sawdust, no secrets, just bread. You barely have time to wipe your hands on your apron before the church bell tolls noon. It's not just a call to prayer, it's the reminder that you, a humble, flour-covered mortal, are about to face your most stressful visitor of the week, the bread inspector. You've met him before. Tall Pinched always smells faintly of onions and suspicion. His official title is something grand like King's Assayman of bread and ale, but everyone in town just calls him Topham the Taster. You suspect he enjoys his job a little too much. Topham doesn't just sample loaves, he dissects them. He sniffs the crust, breaks the crumb with the ceremony of a bishop handling a relic, and always chews slowly as if performing moral judgment with his molars. He never speaks during the tasting, just chews, looks, and either nods or frowns like you've personally offended St. Honoré, the patron of bakers, and if he frowns, you get fined. Or worse, because Topham carries more than just an appetite. He carries the scales, not metaphorical ones, real ones, iron, heavy, balanced to royal standard. Hung from a wooden frame like a travelling guillotine for bread-based dreams. When he arrives, he sets them down slowly with the dramatic flair of a man who knows his moment has come. The weights clink as he lays them out half-pound, full-pound, quarter-stone. His eyes sweep the stall. You stand ready. You've weighed every loaf twice, measured every ingredient, eyeballed the fire, prayed quietly not for divine protection but for your sourdough to behave itself this time. Still your stomach tightens. Topham picks a loaf at random. It's always random. That's the horror. You never know which one will become the test loaf. He sets it on the scale. The iron creaks. He waits. So do you. It balances. Barely. He gives a faint nod. You don't breathe again until he walks to the next stall. Your apprentice whispers, "That was close." You whisper back, "That was luck." Because in truth, even the best baker can be tripped up by the law's math. The Assize of bread and ale, first issued in 1266, and amended more times than a gossip's favourite story outlines exactly how much a loaf must weigh based on the current price of grain. The formula is complex. Flour cost plus fuel divided by weight minus profit, times standard coinage value rounded to the nearest farthing. There are charts, tables, scrolls, probably a curse or two. Historians still argue whether anyone in town ever truly understood it. Some claim the whole thing was designed to protect the poor. Others say it was a clever way for officials to squeeze both bakers and buyers under the same wooden heel. One thing is certain, it made bakers paranoid. Because the law shifted with the market. 1 week a penny buys a loaf the size of your head. The next, that same penny is only worth a loaf the size of your fist. Customers don't always understand this. They grumble. Last week's loaf was bigger, they say. Why is this one so small? You try to explain the grain price went up. They stare like you're making it up. You aren't. You wish you were. That's why Topham exists. To enforce the Assize, to test your bread, to keep the market fair. But fairness feels like a stretch when you've been up since midnight and your kneading arm is twitching like a flag in a storm. Topham moves on. You exhale. The stall next to yours isn't so lucky. The young baker from the south end, bright smile, new apron loaves stacked like a castle gets weighed. The scale dips, doesn't rise. Topham frowns. The loaf is light, just barely. But in the world of medieval bread, barely is enough to earn you a finer lecture and a public record of shame. Your master always said, better to lose an ounce of profit than an ounce off a loaf. You never understood it as a child. Now it lives in your bones. The bread inspector leaves without further damage. You reward yourself with a corner from the test loaf. Still warm, still honest. That's enough. But there's more to these inspections than weight. There's taste too. Topham returns on festival weeks with a second man and ale taster. Together they assess the town's most basic consumables, bread and beer. If either goes bad, tempers flare, and if both fail, riot. It's happened before. The winter scourge of 1303. Grain went mouldy. Bakers were forced to bake with half-rotted rye. Some didn't even know it was bad. Others didn't care. A week later, half the town was sick. The other half was angry. Bread stalls were overturned. One baker was chased into the river. He survived, but he moved. You don't want to move, so you remain cautious. You weigh, you taste, you listen. Sometimes bread itself gives warning signs. A too shiny crust might mean too much lard. A greenish tint could signal spoilage. A loaf that's too quiet when tapped might be underbaked. One that sounds hollow might have been hollowed on purpose. Yes, some bakers have done that. Scooped out the inside of a loaves to save dough, covered it up with perfect crust, sold it at full price. Once discovered, that trick earned a baker not just the pillory, but the dunking stool. You've never seen it used, but you've heard the stories. Bread crime is serious, because bread is sacred. You remember your master once saying the town will forgive a late loaf. It won't forgive a dishonest one. You didn't understand it then. You do now. As the day winds down, you recheck your remaining loaves. Some will be stale by morning. You'll donate them, or soak them for pottage. Nothing gets wasted. Topham has vanished down the road, his scales bouncing gently as he walks, probably headed to the alehouse. He tests the beer too. You've seen him test 8 tankards in one sitting. You once asked him how he tells good ale from bad after drink number 5. He winked. I wait until I fall over. If the ground tastes sweet, it was a good batch. You hope he trips today. Gently, of course. As you sweep the day's flour from the doorstep, you think about the system, the rules, the punishments, the weight. And you realise for all the drama and dread, maybe, just maybe, it's kept things right. Because even now, centuries later, people still trust their bakers. They still gather for bread, still greet its scent like an old friend, and that trust rests on the scale. As the sun leans westward, casting long amber shadows over the thatched rooftops and creaky shutters of the village, you begin your evening routine with the same weary rhythm that has guided your limbs since you first stepped into a bakehouse. The day's fire is fading, but the air inside still swells with the warmth of yeast and smoke, and the comforting scent of scorched flour clings to the stones like an old friend who overstays his welcome. Your stall is closed for the day. The final crumbs swept into a corner, and what few unsold loaves remain have been tucked away wrapped in linen, ready to be rebaked or repurposed. You lean your weight against the work table legs, trembling slightly from standing since before dawn. Your shoulders ache, your eyes sting, but the bread is made, the scales balanced, the inspector satisfied for now. You think you're done, and then she shows up, Mistress Branwen, the debt collector, the barter queen. She's the kind of woman who glides when she walks and stares like she already knows what you're hiding. She doesn't carry a coin pouch because she doesn't need one. She trades. Always trades. Her offers are rarely fair, but they're never foolish. And somehow, she always seems to know what you're running low on before you do. She stands in front of your stall arm's folded cloak drawn tightly around her, her silver grey braid coiled like a rope over one shoulder. She doesn't say hello. She never does. "I'll take 2 of your good ones," she says, gesturing with her chin at the basket of manchi you weren't even displaying. She must have seen you tuck them under the cloth earlier. You hesitate. Those are meant for tomorrow, for the merchant from the city who actually pays in silver. But refusing her isn't wise. She's connected to everyone from the grain guild to the town reeve. Deny her now and you might find your flour deliveries rerouted or your stall moved next market day to a dark alley that smells like dead turnips. You reach down, pull 2 loaves and hand them over. They're perfect, golden soft, still warm from the oven's final breath. She offers you a small pouch in return. You open it. Seeds. Parsley, onion, fennel, a few fat pumpkin seeds, and something small and red that might be chili or might be beetroot with an attitude. You blink. She meets your eye, that thin smile creeping onto her face. You'll want them, she says. Market day's coming? She's not wrong. Market day is not a gentle thing. It is not a slow stroll and a polite exchange of goods over fresh herbs and compliments. It's war. It's theatre. It's survival in burlap aprons. You nod. She turns. And just like that, she vanishes into the golden haze of the settling afternoon. You pocket the seeds. She's given you an edge. And you'll need it. Because on market day, bread becomes blood sport. It's the one day a week the village turns into something larger, buzzing with farmers, merchants, tanners, tinkers, fishwives and fortune tellers. Flags fly, bells ring. Children run wild, dogs bark. Carts roll in with new wheels and rickety legs and barrels of everything from salted cod to questionable plums. And at the heart of it all, bread. Your bread, and everyone else's. Dozens of bakers, both local and visiting, elbow their way into the square to claim space. Some arrive at dawn to set up little canvas tents adorned with painted signs, Year older oven, God's crumb, honest Hilda's barley rounds. They shout over one another, brandishing samples like swords trying to tempt weary travellers with discounts and loaves that sparkle with egg wash and smugness. You have a spot. It's not the best, but it's yours. Right beside the stone wall near the apothecary, with enough shade to keep your bread from sweating, but close enough to the road for foot traffic. Still, it's a hard fight. Because your competition isn't always honest. Some undercut your prices, some dilute their dough, some splash water on their crust to make them look fresh. You've seen worse. You remember one particularly bold baker from a neighbouring village, sleek moustache, cocky grin bread so light it floated. Turned out he'd been baking hollow loaves, empty inside all crust and lies. When the inspector found out the man was sentenced to sell his wares, blindfolded for a day so customers could inspect his bread while he couldn't see theirs, he never came back. You, however, keep coming. Because you know the trick isn't being louder, cheaper or shinier. The trick is being trusted. People come to you for your maslin rounds, your rye twists, your seeded oat flats that you dust with just a hint of salt. Your loaves are never the biggest, never the lightest, but they're solid, honest, reliable. And in a world where the fishmonger might sell you river eels instead of ocean cod, that kind of reliability matters. That's why the seeds from Mistress Branwen are valuable. They give you a new offering. Tomorrow you'll bake something rare flavoured bread. Just one tray, nothing flashy. Maybe a few rounds with parsley and onion, or a long roll with pumpkin seed folded in. You'll call it herb loaf. The name alone will intrigue. The scent will do the rest. And because you'll only make a few, they'll seem even more special. Scarcity is its own kind of seasoning. You gather your supplies, sort your tools, check your firewood, brush the day's flour from your clothes and check your stock again. Tomorrow your stall must be clean, the cloth crisp, the bread stacked at 3 levels, basic, standard and special. People want choice, even if they always pick the cheapest. And yet sometimes, just sometimes, a tired father with a worn purse and a limp smile buys your best loaf for no other reason than to give his family something better. And those are the moments that make the whole madness feel worth it. Back inside, you prep your doughs, you mix, knead, rest. Your apprentice washes the boards. You instruct him to soak the grain sack cloths and scrub the proofing baskets. Why so thorough, he asks, yawning. You smile. Because tomorrow we compete, you say. But isn't our bread good? It is, you nod. But it has to look better too. Even saints had to shine their halos for festivals. He blinks, then nods. You let him go to bed. You stay behind. Because the first tray of parsley round still needs shaping and your oven deserves one last clean sweep. Market day looms, and with it both opportunity and chaos. But you are ready. You have your stall, your seeds, your sourdough, your oath. And soon, if luck favours the honest, you'll have your customers' trust once again. The darkness before market day has a strange hum to it. Not the peaceful stillness of midnight when the village sleeps, nor the pre-dawn quiet where birds stretch their wings and wind slips beneath doors. No, this is the dense, watchful silence of anticipation. Everyone knows what tomorrow means, the merchants, the mothers, the thieves, and most of all the bakers. You rise before the stars even start to fade. You never really slept. No one does before market day. Your body aches from the dozen tasks you forced it through last night, but there's no room for complaints now. You've got flour under your fingernails, bruises on your forearms from hauling wood, and a strange bump on your shin that may or may not be a proofing basket imprint. Your fire has been smouldering since late evening. Now it must burn hot and high. You stir the ashes, stoke the flames, and whisper your usual promise to the oven. It's silly, more habit than belief, but every baker has their rituals. You place your hand near the hearth and feel its pulse. Today it must behave. There is no room for uneven bake, no time to cry over loaves that turn too dark or stay too pale. The doughs from the night before are ready, soft, risen, breathing like sleeping animals in their cloth-lined baskets. You work quickly, scoring each loaf with care, dusting a few with oats, brushing others with weak ale to give them sheen. And then with practiced grace you slide them into the oven one by one. Each loaf a soldier going into battle, and in some ways that's exactly what they are, because market day is more than just a selling ground. It's a tournament, a test of everything you've baked, built and believed in. It's the one day of the week that can make or break your reputation. One wrong loaf, one cracked crust, one spoiled batch, and you'll be the subject of whispered ridicule until the next Saint's Day. You arrange your baskets carefully, wrap the special herb loaves in linen cloth, and stack your maslins and oat rolls in tidy rows. You tie on your cleanest apron, still stained, but less shamefully so. You carry everything out on a handcart, your bread, your tools, your hopes. Your apprentice trails behind arms full of a folded table stool cloth, and that hand-painted sign that just says bread in big, slightly crooked letters. The market square is already buzzing when you arrive. The tanner is arguing with the cheese seller over stall placement. Two butchers are fighting again about whether one of them is selling mutton disguised as beef. A peddler has set up a small display of shiny rocks he insists are healing stones, and there already in position with her perfect stall and smug smile stands Gilda. Ah, Gilda. The East Quarter's most irritating baker. She's younger than you, louder than necessary, and always manages to get a spot 2 steps closer to the square's centre. Her bread looks like it was arranged by angels. She always wears that ridiculous cap with lace frills that flap when she moves. Today she's waving a sign that reads Fresh Lavender Honey Loaves. Limited batch lavender in bread. You shake your head. No one asked for flowers in their dough. But you've seen this before. Last market day it was cheese-stuffed rolls. The week before, wild mint biscuits that tasted like toothpaste and betrayal. Gilda's not a bad baker, but she's a loud one, and sometimes that's enough to win over the crowd. You find your spot, the one next to the apothecary's stall, where the breeze carries your bread scent across the pathway. You set up, lay out your cloth, stack the loaves. You place the herb breads just slightly forward, not too obvious, but eye-catching enough for anyone looking for something different. The first customers drift in. The baker's code says you must smile even when you don't feel it. You smile until your jaw aches. You describe the loaves like a poet rye with toasted fennel oat and seed flatbread, herb-stuffed barley round good with stews. You hand out slivers for tasting, and your apprentice keeps the table tidy, his hands never idle. Gilda's voice rings out every few minutes. Last tray. Get it while it's warm. You know she has at least 3 trays hidden under her stall. Still people gather. The old cobbler buys 2 maslins from you. The town clerk selects a rye twist. A visiting merchant buys a special loaf, one of your herb rounds, and raises his brows in surprise after the first bite. He nods. That nod. That's gold. He'll be back. By late morning the crowd thickens. Children chase dogs. Pigs squeal in baskets. Bells clang from a far end of the square, and a drummer announces the arrival of an official courier. No one listens. Everyone's too busy bargaining. The reeve passes your stall. He doesn't stop. That's good. It means you're safe for now. The true test is yet to come. The weighing. At the centre of the square, under a faded blue awning, sits a man with a set of royal certified scales. Each market day he selects 1 baker at random, 1 tray, 1 loaf, and if that loaf is underweight, you don't get fined. You get publicly shamed. The announcer calls out, "Today's bread for weighing." Gilda. You exhale so sharply it startles a nearby goose. The inspector walks over to her stall, selects a loaf and places it on the scale. Gilda grins. She knows the game. Her loaves are always overweight by ½ an ounce just in case. The scale balances. Applause follows. She curtsies like she's just been knighted. You want to throw a crust at her, but you don't. Instead you sell another loaf, then another. The herb rounds are gone by midday. The maslins dwindle. You even sell the oat biscuits you thought no one liked. By the time the sun crests the square's highest wall, your stall is nearly empty. You've won. Quietly, steadily, honestly. You begin to pack up. Your apprentice beams. "Best market yet," he says. You nod. Tomorrow it starts again. The fire, the flour, the weight. But tonight you'll sleep, and you'll dream of bread not as burden but as triumph. Evening rolls in slow like honey drizzled from a spoon. The shadows stretch longer over the cobbled streets, and the air still tinged with the smell of livestock and roasted nuts from the market stalls begins to cool. Your legs throb, your arms ache, and your shoulders feel like someone beat them with a sack of barley. But your cart is empty. Your apron is stuffed with coins and crumbs, and for once, just once, no one called your bread dryer's confession. You and your apprentice push the handcart back through the village square. It rattles now with nothing in it but the wooden trays and cloth coverings. No leftover loaves today, not even a broken heel. You sold everything. Even the seed rounds, which you were sure were too weird for the crowd, disappeared before noon. Someone said the parsley one tasted like spring had punched their mouth. You're still deciding if that was a compliment. The boy hums as he walks pleased with himself. He's earned it. Didn't drop a single tray, didn't eat any of the product, at least not while you were looking, and only forgot the name of the fennel twist once. He even smiled at the customers. Real smiles, not just the painted-on kind you give the reeve. But as you near the bakehouse, fatigue sets in. Not just in your body, in your soul. Because you know something the boy doesn't. The day's not over. Not for you. You get the cart inside, lower the shutters, and start putting away the tools. The bench is wiped, the cloths are rinsed, the leftover dough is tossed into the scrap bucket to be fed to pigs or boiled into something that might pass for porridge. The fire is banked but not out, because tonight you still have to bake, not for customers, not for coin, for the church, of course. Every Saturday night as regular as sin and twice as demanding, the church sends for the blessed batch, the communion loaves, and not just any bread. Oh no, this isn't your sturdy maslin or rough rye. This is the sacred round, baked to strict rules, unyeasted, unsalted, unmarred. It must be pure, holy and boring. They don't say that, but you know it. This is the body they claim, and the body must not have bubbles or burnt edges. It must not crack or crumble. It must not resemble the crusty practical loaves that keep the people alive. It must be made of fine white flour, which you only receive in small precious sacks marked for this purpose and stored like gold. You say nothing. You get to work. You scrub your hands twice. You clean the table with fresh water. You dust the surface with cloth instead of flour, because even flour specks from your working bin might pollute the holiness of what's to come. You take the white flour, soft as silk, pale as moonlight. You mix it with water cold and clean. You knead it gently. This dough doesn't rise. It doesn't swell or puff or breathe. It just sits tight and obedient. You shape the loaves small rounds flat like coins for saints. You score tiny crosses into each one with the tip of your blade. No flair, no artisan cuts, just the mark they expect. And while you work, you think about the people who will eat this bread tomorrow, not knowing your hands formed it, that you stayed up late shaping it, that you whispered a quiet curse when the first one cracked across the top. They'll line up in the pews with bowed heads and open palms, and they'll taste your labour as a wafer of holiness. They won't know what went into it. Or maybe they will. Maybe they know more than they say. Your apprentice enters. He rubs his eyes and mumbles, "You're still baking." You nod. He sees the communion rounds. He frowns. "They don't pay enough." You shrug. "They don't pay," he adds, grumbling. You shrug again. "They pay in promises, and that's the truth of it. The church doesn't pay in coin. Not for this. They pay in goodwill, in position, in not so subtle influence. Bake their bread and your name gets passed around the parish council. Bake it well and you might be first in line next time grain is distributed during a short season. Bake it wrong and you might find yourself forgotten at tax review. So you bake. Quietly, carefully, obediently. The loaves go into the oven. It's hot but not searing. You watch them closely. 1 minute too long and they'll scorch. 1 minute too soon and they'll bend. There is no forgiveness in communion baking. While they bake, you sit. Drink a mouthful of watered down ale. Watch the coals crackle. The apprentice has fallen asleep against a flour sack again, mouth slightly open, face smudged with soot and pride. You leave him there. The oven gives a soft hiss. You open the door. The loaves are done. Perfect. Flat. Unoffensive. Holy. You set them on a clean cloth near the window to cool. The moonlight catches the edges of the crosses you scored. For a moment they almost glow. You wonder if this is what peace feels like. Probably not, but it's close enough. Then comes the knock, right on time. A small figure at the door, a boy of 10 or 11 wrapped in a cloak far too large, one hand clutching a basket, the other a parchment note with Father Gregory's crooked script, 6 rounds. God bless. No rush, but don't be late. You hand the loaves over. The boy sniffs them, says nothing, nods once, hands you the empty basket and vanishes into the night like a reverent mouse. You close the door. Back in the bakehouse, you blow out the lantern. Sit for a moment longer. The fire dims. The coals whisper. The room smells of warm flour, of smoke, and of something soft beneath the usual crust of exhaustion. This bread, the communion bread, it won't feed a family. It won't barter for cabbage. It won't make you rich. But it will be broken tomorrow in front of half the town. It will be shared by hands calloused from work, by mouths that laughed at your jokes today, or spat at your prices last week. It's a reminder that bread is more than food. It's memory, it's ritual, it's trust, and that's why you bake it. Not for payment, for presence. So when they kneel at the altar tomorrow, silent and solemn and blinking in the candlelight, they'll know the bread came from someone who cared. Even if they never say thank you. Even if they never learn your name. You bank the coals, stretch once more, and finally you sleep. The moment the sun rises on Monday, it feels different. The market stalls are gone, the square is quiet, and your hands somehow feel even heavier than they did after Saturday's baking and Sunday's mass. You sit on the edge of your workbench sipping lukewarm ale and watching the embers of yesterday's fire shift lazily beneath the ashes. It's the calm after the storm, but calm never lasts, because Monday morning is when the bread lines grow long. Not official ones, no ropes or guards or numbered tokens, just quiet ones, unspoken, understood. It starts with a knock, then another, then a low cough outside the door, the kind that says I'm waiting but I won't beg. You hear it. You always do. These aren't paying customers. These are the others. The ones who hover at the edges of market day watching coins change hands they don't have. The widow from the edge of the village. The family who lost their pig to sickness. The boy whose father never returned from the border levy. You open the door before they knock again. No one says anything at first. They never do. You nod. Step aside. You keep a small stack of loaves in a linen-lined basket under the counter. Not the best, not the freshest, but still good. Still food. You hand one to the widow, another to the boy, a third to the man who only appears once a week, always wearing the same coat, always taking his loaf with a bowed head. You don't ask questions. You don't take payment. That's not what this is. This is duty. A baker doesn't just feed the wealthy or the punctual. A baker feeds the village, even the parts that don't make it into the ledgers. You once tried to turn someone away. A young girl, ragged, barefoot, asking for bread with the eyes that had seen too many yesterdays. You told her there was none left. Technically true. You'd sold everything, even the scraps. But as she turned to go, you remembered something your master once said. If someone asks for bread and you have flour, you're not empty. So you made a flatbread from the day-old dough scraped from the mixing bowl. It wasn't beautiful, but it was warm. She smiled, said nothing. Came back a week later with a daisy. You still have it pressed in a book. Historians rarely write about this part of baking. The unseen loaves, the unpaid ones, the quiet exchanges that never make it into tax rolls or guild records. But they're the ones that matter most. Because bread is more than currency. It's community. You wash your hands after the last visitor leaves, rewrap the linen around the remaining loaves. You'll keep a few aside in case someone comes after dusk. Your apprentice appears rubbing sleep from his eyes. Busy already, he asks. You nod. He looks at the basket. We don't charge for those. No, you reply. While you pause, then say, because if bread isn't for sharing, then what is it for? He doesn't argue. Instead, he joins you in kneading the morning dough. Today's bake will be smaller. After market day demand dips, people stretch their loaves for an extra day or two, especially those who paid extra for your manchet or herb twists. Still, a few taverns need restocking, and a merchant has ordered a tray of rye flatbreads for a journey eastward. You start the sponge, mix the flour and water, add the sour starter you've nurtured like a child. Fold, wait, breathe. The apprentice asks if you ever get tired of it. You smile. Every day you say, and every day I'd do it again. Because baking isn't about novelty, it's about consistency, trust, familiarity, the knowledge that something will rise even when everything else feels like it's falling apart. While the dough rests, you step outside. The village is slower now, the rush is over. A woman hangs linens in the alley. A boy kicks a rock into a chicken. The church bell tolls softly for matins, echoing off the stone walls like a lullaby that overslept. You think about yesterday's mass, about the communion bread you shaped in the quiet hours. You wonder if it broke clean, if the priest said his lines with extra reverence, if the congregation tasted your effort, or if they swallowed it without thought. Either way, you know you did your part. Back inside, the dough is ready. You knead it while the apprentice oils the trays. You let your hands find their rhythm, the push, the fold, the roll. Your mind wanders, as it always does during kneading, to the gossip you heard in the square, to the way Gilda's table had too many unsold lavender rolls, to the one loaf that came back to your stall uneaten with no explanation. You wonder if it was underbaked, or just underappreciated. Bread doesn't talk, but it tells stories, and if you listen carefully, it tells you everything. The apprentice finishes prepping the oven. He's getting better. He used to fear the heat jump at the crack of the fire. Now he moves with quiet confidence. You watch him slide the first tray of rounds into the oven, and for a moment you see a future where you aren't the one doing this every day. A future where the bakehouse runs without you, where your name becomes something whispered in flour and remembered in crust. You shake the thought away. Too early for legacies. There's still bread to make. As the loaves bake, the air fills again with that familiar scent, yeast ash comfort. You pour a cup of beer and sit near the door. The apprentice joins you. Neither of you speaks. There's no need. The fire crackles. The dough rises. The village for now is fed, and even as the bread lines return, silent, shamefaced, humble, you know exactly what to do. You rise, break a loaf in half, hand it to the woman waiting by the door. No words, just bread. Because sometimes that's all you need, and sometimes it's everything. It's still dark when you hear the ladder creak. A sleepy thud, a clumsy curse, and then your apprentice appears in the doorway wrapped in yesterday's tunic hair, wild face still creased with the lines of the grain sack he uses as a pillow. You don't say anything. You're already elbow deep in dough forearms dusted with flour, your back hunched over the table like it's your second spine. He blinks at you confused. You're already working, he asks, rubbing one eye. You nod without looking up. It's not that you couldn't have waited. It's just that some habits stick, like waking before the sun, or folding a cloth over your loaves even when the oven's still cold. You've been a baker long enough that your body follows the rhythm of the dough, not the sky. Today's a special day, though no one would call it that out loud. Today's apprentice day, not officially, of course. There's no holiday for it, no bells rung, no feast prepared. But in every bakehouse, across every village in the realm, there's a moment when the baker steps back, crosses their arms, and says the 5 most terrifying words a young apprentice can hear. You do the batch today. You remember the day your master said those words to you? His name was Corbin. Thick hands, thicker eyebrows, voice like gravel ground through a wine barrel. He was never cruel, but he was never gentle either. He believed in hard crusts, hard work, and harder lessons. When he gave you the bake for the first time, you were too nervous to speak. You nodded. He said, "You mess it up, I'll feed it to the pigs." And you believed him. You didn't mess it up. Much. The crust cracked too wide, the loaves were uneven, and one of the rounds came out looking like a small, sad hat. But you did it. You baked. You watched the fire. You pulled your loaves from the heat without dropping a single one. And when the townspeople ate them the next day, no one died. No one even complained. That night Corbin poured you a mug of beer, said could have been worse. That was his version of praise. Now years later, it's your turn to say those 5 words. The apprentice wipes his face throws on his apron and stands beside you waiting. You glance at the rising sponge in the bowl. It bubbles with quiet enthusiasm. A good sign. You nod toward it. All right, you say. You do the batch today. His eyes widen. He looks down at the sponge, then back at you. Me. All of it. You nod again. I'll help with the fire, but you need shape score load. The whole thing. He hesitates. You wait. Then slowly he steps forward. Hands trembling just a little. He dips into the flour bin, scoops out what he thinks is the right amount too much, but you say nothing and pours it into the mixing bowl. He adds water, salt, a touch of oil. The yeast is already in the sponge. Now it's just muscle. He begins to knead. It's not graceful. His movements are awkward, jerky, but he tries. He presses, folds, turns. Sweat dots his brow before the dough even smooths out. You walk to the hearth, start feeding the fire. He glances over every so often looking for approval. You give none. Not yet. Because this isn't about praise. It's about pressure. About responsibility. About learning to feel the dough instead of fearing it. Historians often talk about medieval apprenticeships in terms of years' contracts rights. But what they miss is this moment, this quiet test, this fragile shift in power when a child begins to stand like a baker. No signature marks the transition, no ceremony, just flour, fire, and 100 tiny mistakes. He lets the dough rise too long. You smell it before you see it overproofed a little sour. You could say something, you don't. Instead, you help him shape the loaves. Gently, quickly. He scores them too deep, but the slashes are clean. You nod. They'll bloom, you say. Might crack, but they'll bloom. He smiles. You load the oven together. It's hot, but not too hot. The kind of heat that listens when you ask. The fire is kind today. That helps. He watches the first batch through the opening. As the loaves rise, so does his posture. You see it the way he shifts his weight forward, the way his brow furrows in concentration. He's not pretending anymore, he's baking. And for a moment you're not in the bakehouse, you're in the past. You're the one watching the oven. Corbin standing behind you, arms crossed, saying nothing. You remember the fear, the thrill, the smell of your first success. The apprentice grabs the peel. Not yet, you say. Another minute. He waits, counts under his breath, then pulls. The first loaf comes out golden, a little wide. The crust is uneven, but it's bread. It's his bread. You slice one. Steam spills out. The crumb is soft, slightly dense, but well baked. You tear off a piece, taste it, chew, then nod. Could have been worse. His face breaks into a grin so wide it might crack his cheeks. You hand him a piece. He eats it like it's a crown jewel. Next batch, he asks. You shrug. You tell me. Because that's the point. A baker doesn't just bake. A baker leads. He prepares the second batch. Faster this time. More confident. He adjusts the flour, adds a splash more water, changes the shape slightly. These are his choices now. You only watch. While the second batch rises, you sit by the fire and rub your hands worn-lined stiff. You think about all the apprentices who passed through Corbin's door. Some stayed, some left. One became a brewer, one died in a fire, one moved to the city and opened a bakery near the docks. You don't know where your apprentice will go, but you know he'll carry your bread with him, even if he changes it. Even if he shapes it differently, adds flavours, experiments with ideas you never dared. Because bread, like people, evolves. And if you're lucky, it improves. You eat another slice from the first batch. Still warm, still simple, but honest. Later, when the second batch is done, you help him wrap the loaves. He arranges them proudly on the board. Can I sell them, he asks. You nod. And when the townspeople arrive later in the morning, they do notice something different. They ask if you've changed the flour, if you used new salt, if the fire was kinder. You smile and say nothing. Because part of being a baker is letting the bread speak. And today it says something new. The sun is dipping low behind the chapel roof when you finally close the shutters. Another Monday nearly gone, and you've barely sat down once. Your apron is stiff with flour, your back sore from lifting dough bins, and your arms buzz with that familiar tiredness, not quite pain, not quite pleasure. Just the steady ache of a job done the right way. The bakery smells faintly of baked rye, ash and thyme. A few loaves sit cooling near the window, 2 barley twists, and a lopsided oat bun that never quite recovered from its awkward rise. You'd usually sell it off cheap to the tavern boys or give it to the stable hand who comes late, but today you don't feel like parting with it. Something about that loaf feels honest. You'll keep it. Maybe eat it yourself. Bakers should taste their own imperfections now and then. The apprentice is still glowing from his morning success. You haven't seen him this animated since the day he learned to start the fire without burning his eyebrows. He's cleaned the boards twice, rewrapped the cloths, and started humming while sweeping the corners off-key but with purpose. You sip the last of your beer and lean against the doorframe, watching the street outside grow quieter. Children call out from alleyways. A man rolls a barrel past, humming a tune you half recognise from feast days. The air smells like early summer warm dust, young grass, wood, smoke. Then the sound comes. Ding. The shop bell. Not your usual bell over the counter. No. This is the pull bell strung beside the outer door, and only used by people who know better than to barge in or think themselves too important to wait. You glance at the apprentice. He freezes mid-sweep. Who is it? You sigh, already knowing. You open the door slowly, and yes, there she is, Madame Weft, the village's most notorious lace merchant, known for her impeccable cuffs, her silken veils, and her uncanny ability to speak in compliments that feel like insults. She's wrapped in an absurdly thick cloak, even though the weather barely calls for a shawl, and carries a cane that she doesn't use so much as brandish. She peers past you into the shop with a squint that could curdle cream. I do hope, she says, her voice like dried mint, that I'm not too late to secure something edible. You resist the urge to groan. Depends what you're looking for, you say, polite as a prayer. She sniffs, stepping inside uninvited. Her gaze sweeps the remaining loaves with disdainful precision. She lifts one barley twist, pinches the crust, then lets it fall back, as if it had personally insulted her lineage. This will do, she says. Of course it will, it always does. You hand it over. She drops something into your hand in return. A silver thimble. Not coin. Not even a token. Just a thimble, tiny, useless for you, but probably worth a small sum at the right booth during harvest fair. You've learned not to argue. Madame Weft deals in favours, not prices, and those favours, when used correctly, can be worth far more than a few copper bits. Still, you grumble as you drop it into your drawer. The apprentice watches, fascinated. Is that real silver real enough, you say? Will she pay with spoons next time? Wouldn't be the first. He snickers, but you don't. You've been at this long enough to know that everyone pays in their own way. Some in coin, some in kind, some in respect, and some in things you can't measure until much later. You step outside, wiping your hands on your apron, and take a long look down the village road. Market day is still 5 sleeps away, but you already feel it coming. The murmur, the rush, the endless list in your head. What's tomorrow? The apprentice asks, joining you with a cloth in his hand. Flatbread for the tavern, 2 rounds of oat and onion for the butcher's wife, and whatever's left goes to the abbey. He nods. Should I make the starter tonight? You raise an eyebrow. You want to. He shrugs. Might as well get it right. That answer pleases you more than you let on. You head inside and watch as he preps the bowl. He measures the flour too carefully, like it's gold dust. But his touch is improving. His wrist no longer locks when he stirs, and he finally remembers to check the temperature of the water before adding it. You say nothing. Let the silence be its own kind of praise. And then you do something unexpected. You take out the ledger, not your baking note, your real ledger, the one you've written in for years. Names, dates, orders, weather patterns, mistakes, secrets. Every good baker keeps one. You flip to a clean page. At the top you write his name, and next to it, first batch sold clean. 5 oat, 4 rye, 2 barley. 1 returned burnt heel. Not his fault. Fire too high. Lesson noted. You don't show him the page. But later, when he's gone to bed and the fire is dimmed, you'll add something else. A good eye, fast hands, will shape better loaves than me someday if he stays. Because you see it now. He's not just learning the motions, he's learning the meaning. He asked about consistency today. Asked how you manage the same bake day after day. You told him the truth. Consistency, you said, isn't about doing it the same every time. It's about adjusting the right way every time it changes, because the dough changes, the air changes, the fire changes, and the baker must change too, but the trust must stay the same. That's what people come for. Not perfection, not novelty, just trust. A loaf that will taste familiar, a crust that cracks just so, a crumb that holds together in stew. The apprentice yawns, packs away the bowls, lights the stub of a candle in the corner. You hand him the lopsided oat bun. He blinks. You're giving me the ugly one, you smile. It's still bread. He bites into it, chews, nods. Tastes right, he says. You turn off the lantern, and you say half to him, half to yourself. That's all it needs to do. The rain that started on Tuesday hasn't stopped by Wednesday. It's the sort of rain that seeps into the wood of the bakery walls, makes the stones sweat, and turns the floor into a patchwork of damp footprints and puddled ash. It drips off the edge of the roof with an insistent plop-plop falling into a cracked clay basin below the eaves. The kind of rain that if you weren't a baker might make you stay in bed a little longer hoping the world could wait. But you are a baker, and the world never waits for bread. The fire has already been burning for an hour. You lit it before the first bird sang, your fingers stiff from cold, your sleeves soaked from the walk out to the woodpile. You chopped fresh logs yesterday, knowing this storm was coming. Wet wood is no friend to an oven, and you can't afford the smoke or the uneven heat. Inside, the air is thick with steam and sweat. The heat doesn't chase the damp away. It only makes it warmer, heavier, like baking inside a wool cloak. You've just pulled the first batch of flatbreads when your apprentice arrives, his cloak clinging to him like a second skin. He shakes the rain from his hair and hangs his bundle by the hearth. Still coming down, you ask. He nods. River's swelling. Farmer Haler says the ford'll be underwater by nightfall. That's bad news. Not because you have anywhere to go today, but because your Thursday delivery route crosses that ford, and that route cannot wait. Thursday bread is different. It's not for market. It's not for the shop window. It's not even for the church. It's for the villages beyond. Every week you bake a special batch heavy rye wheels, dense barley loaves, flat oat cakes. Long-lasting, travel-ready, built to endure the bumps of the cart and the hands of hungry children. You've been baking these loaves since before your apprentice arrived, since before your master gave you the keys to the shop, since the winter when all the southern villages went hungry and the guild offered nothing but sympathy. You remember loading that first cart yourself. You remember the mud, the frost, the weight of 40 loaves pressing into your ribs as the donkey trudged forward. You remember the faces, and ever since you've made it a point they will get bread. Rain or not. But the catch is Thursday. Bread can't be baked on Thursday. It has to cool first, to settle, to firm up enough to survive the journey. That means today, Wednesday, is the big day. The one that starts before dawn and ends after the candles gutter low. You and your apprentice get to work. He knows the drill, mixes the barley batch first. Thick, shaggy, almost like clay. It needs to be firm, not pretty. You'll shape it into wheels, bake it low and slow and stack it like coins. You take the rye, hefty, slightly sour. Your starter is in a good mood today, bubbly, aromatic, just tangy enough to bite. You divide it into long loaves and score them shallowly, just enough to guide the rise. There's also the oat cakes. You mix those with salt, a bit of pork drippings and a fistful of chopped onions. The kind of bread you can eat with your hands while walking behind a plough or rocking a crying baby. The room fills with the scent of grain and effort. Outside, the rain picks up. A breeze whistles through the cracks in the shutter. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once then is silent. Inside, it's only the crackle of the fire, the thump of dough against wood, and your apprentice humming that tune again. He's taller now. Still young, still a bit clumsy, but he's growing into his arms. His shoulders are squarer. His hands know the shape of a round loaf without looking. When he scores the bread now, he doesn't hesitate. You notice these things. You write them in your mental ledger. Mid-morning, the first batch goes into the oven. It's packed tight. These are not delicate loaves. They're meant to endure. While they bake, you shape the oatcakes into thick discs. The apprentice brushes them with lard and lays them out in neat rows. You check his work, frown slightly. You rushed these, you say. He blinks. I know, You point. Edges too sharp. They'll crack in the sack. He exhales. Should I redo them? You look at the batch. Think. Yes, you say. We'll eat these. You bake more. He doesn't argue. That's how you know he's learning. Mistakes happen. But a baker who insists bad bread is good enough is no baker at all. By midday, the bakehouse is a wall of heat. The windows drip condensation. Your shirt sticks to your back, but the shelves are filling up barley wheels cooling on the table loaves stacked like bricks, oatcakes lined up like soldiers. The apprentice eats one of the rejected cakes with jam. You eat another with a chunk of cheese and a sip of cider. Neither of you speaks. You're tired. But the good kind. The kind that comes from doing something real. Then the knock comes. You weren't expecting it. You open the door to find Duran, the old cart driver. He looks like the rain tried to drown him twice and gave up out of pity. His boots squelch. His cloak is soaked. His beard drips. He says only 3 words. Ford's already gone. You blink. It's Wednesday. He nods. It's gone. You feel the weight of that. No Ford means no cart. No cart means no delivery. And no delivery means half a dozen households won't eat bread for the next 3 days. You step back. Look at the loaves. Look at the sacks. The cloth. The roadmap in your mind. You make your decision before the apprentice can speak. We carry it. He gapes. What walk it? Yes, but it's half a day's I've done it before. In this rain you nod. He doesn't argue. Just starts folding the oatcakes and cloth. You pack the barley loaves in the oilcloth-lined sack. The rye goes in the heavy basket. You tie it tight. Double knot. Place the loaves to protect each other. No gaps. You'll take the donkey, load him light and walk slow. It'll take hours. You might not be back before dusk, but the bread will get there. Because it has to. Because people are waiting. And bakers don't just feed the lucky. They feed everyone. Even if it's uphill in the rain with cold water soaking your boots and sore shoulders from the weight of honest loaves. Even then. Especially then. As you close the door sack over your back cloak pulled tight, the apprentice calls out. You'll be back before supper. You glance back. I'll try, you say. Then you step into the rain. And the bread goes with you. The road stretches ahead of you like a river of mud. Thick, glistening and determined to swallow every step. The sky's a blanket of dull grey, the kind that offers no thunder, no lightning, no drama, just an endless drizzle that seeps into the seams of your cloak, into the creases of your boots and into your bones. But the sack on your back is warm. The loaves inside it are still fresh from the oven, wrapped in linen, tucked in oilskin, stacked carefully to keep their shape. It smells of rye, barley, onions and heat. You carry it all because it's Wednesday, and on Wednesdays you walk. You've done this for years. Rain, snow, wind that howls through the hedges like a pack of wolves. You've walked when your ankle ached, when your hands were cracked, when the fire gave out halfway through the bake and you had to finish the bread in coals and curses. And still you walk, because bread needs delivering, and the people at the end of this road, they need it. Not want, not hope. Not need. The first mile is the worst. Your shoulders resist the weight. The cold stiffens your fingers. The path twists through the woods and you have to duck beneath dripping branches and step carefully around puddles deep enough to drown a small goat. The donkey walks beside you. Old Tom, He's been with you so long you can't remember when he arrived. Just that one day he was there and you never sent him away. He carries the second sack barley wheels and oat cakes, easier on 4 legs than 2. You talk to him as you go, not because he answers, but because it helps. They say the rain won't stop till Sunday, you mutter. Tom snorts. Can't argue with that. You reach the stone marker at the half point. A squat thing barely knee-high, carved with old letters too worn to read. You stop here every time. Rest. Adjust the straps. Rub your knees. Catch your breath. Today you only pause long enough to drink from the flask you packed a thin ale, warm and flat. It does the job. Then onward. The road bends toward the river, or what used to be a river. Today it's a wide sheet of churning brown water flooded well past the banks, creeping over the low path that once led to the ford. No cart could cross that now. No wheel would survive. You're glad you didn't even try. Walking is slow, but it gets you there. You take the long way, skirting the rise, following the deer path up and around the bluff. It adds an hour, maybe more. Your legs protest, your back screams, but you keep going, because bread is waiting. At the top of the ridge, the wind picks up. It tears at your hood, flattens the bushes, scatters rain in your eyes, but the view is worth it. Below, nestled in the fold between 2 low hills, is the village of Bywater. Just 20 or 30 souls, a chapel, 3 stone cottages, 2 longhouses, 1 school shed with a hole in the roof, and beyond them green fields even now in the rain. You see smoke rising, lanterns glowing, and your heart lifts, because this is why you came. Down the hill you go, careful on the slope. Tom follows, hooves sure and slow. At the first door a child answers, barefoot, wide-eyed, holding a bit of string. You smile. Tell your mum the bread's here. He vanishes like a shadow. The door swings open a moment later. Marie, the boy's mother. She's in her apron hair tied back, face flushed from cooking. She doesn't speak. She just takes the bread with both hands and holds it to her chest like it's a newborn. You hand over 2 rye rounds, 1 barley wheel and a split oat cake. She gives you a jar, in return preserved apples in syrup, tightly sealed. Fair trade, she says. You nod, but you'd have given it to her anyway. You move on. The next house is the smithy. It smells of iron and wet leather. Bran the smith is waiting, arms crossed, apron black with soot. Thought you'd skip us in the rain, he says. You snort. When have I ever? He grins. Never. That's the problem. You hand him a loaf nearly as heavy as his hammer. He gives you nothing in return. But next time you need your door hinges fixed, he'll come. You continue down the row. At each house the same pattern. Bread given. Gratitude returned. Sometimes in coin, sometimes in food, sometimes in favours or promises or nothing at all, it doesn't matter. You wrote nothing down, no list, no bill, but you remember. You always remember. Because a baker's ledger isn't just numbers, it's faces. You visit the chapel last. Father Wynne is sweeping rainwater off the stone steps. He sees you and leans on his broom. Come to save our souls again, he asks. You shrug. Just your stomachs. He smiles. Same thing. You hand him 3 loaves. He gives you a candle. Beeswax. Thick and clean. You tuck it into your sack without a word. Then finally you reach the last cottage. Lisa lives here. Old. Half blind. Legs stiff. Voice soft. She doesn't answer the door. She never does. So you knock once, then open it yourself. Inside, the hearth is cold, the shutters drawn. She sits by the fire in a shawl, staring at nothing. You place the bread beside her. 1 rye, 1 oat. She doesn't turn. But after a moment she says, "You always come." You nod. "I always will." That's all. You step back into the rain. Tom is waiting. The sacks are empty. Your shoulders sag with relief and pride and something deeper. Peace. The way home is longer. The wind has picked up. The rain comes in sheets, now not drops. The path is slippery. Your legs burn. Your cloak soaks through again. But it doesn't matter, because the weight is gone, and the bread is where it belongs. You reach your village after sunset. The streets are quiet. The bakery's light is still on. Inside, your apprentice sits at the bench, turning over a heel of crust in his hands. He jumps when you open the door. You made it. You nod. He stands. Was it yes, you say, before he can finish? It was. You hand him the jar of apples. Payment. He grins. Hungry. You nod. He slices a loaf from the batch he baked that morning, adds butter, hands it over. You chew slowly. Warm, soft, salted just right. You look at him. You baked this. He nods. You smile. It's good. Damn good. You sit. Eat. Rest. Outside, the rain keeps falling, but inside the bakery is full of warmth, and tomorrow you'll rise again, because the bread never sleeps, and neither do those who make it. You don't wake to the sound of firewood cracking or dough being slapped onto the workbench. Not today. Today you wake to a different rhythm, a quieter one. There's movement, yes, but not yours. For the first time in how many years now? You lie still in bed listening as someone else tends to the oven before dawn. At first your mind starts its usual shuffle. The flour needs checking. The sponge must be stirred, the fire stacked just right. But then you stop, because you remember today he's doing the bake, and that changes everything. You let your eyes stay closed for another moment. The blankets are scratchy thin and smell faintly of flour smoke and sweat. They always have. But this morning they also smell like rest. And you've forgotten what rest feels like. Eventually you rise not out of habit but out of curiosity. The air in the bakery is already warm. The fire is strong. The place smells of barley and yeast, the kind of scent that comes from a confident sponge and a steady oven. Promising. You pad into the main room still barefoot. You don't say anything right away. You just lean against the doorway and watch. Your apprentice, no, your baker, now moves with focus. Not grace, not yet, but he moves with confidence. His sleeves are rolled to his elbows, hands deep in dough, pressing, folding, turning with the kind of rhythm that only time and muscle memory create. He doesn't glance at the window or the fire. He doesn't even glance at you. You smile. You taught him this. And now he's doing it without you. He shapes the barley wheels first, just like you always told him. Get the heavy ones in early while the fire's strongest, you said 100 times, and he remembered. His rounds are tight, his edges smooth. The scoring's a little shallow but deliberate. You watch him finish the tray, wipe his hands, and finally turn. You're up, he says. You nod. Didn't want to miss it. He looks almost sheepish. Fire's hot. Sponge rose fast. You walk to the bench and pick up one of the shaped loaves. Press it gently. Not bad, you say. Firm. You proof this long enough. He shrugs, then nods. I started earlier than usual. Thought I'd need more time. You'll need less time the more you trust it, you say. He thinks about that. Nods again. The oven creaks softly as he opens it. He works the peel with practiced hands now. Places the loaves, adjust the heat. You don't step in. You don't offer to help. Because today you're not the baker. Today he is. You sit on the bench with your mug watching the oven door glow orange. Outside the sun is beginning to climb, pushing pale gold through the shutters. You hear the usual clamour of the village waking the smith's hammer, the creak of the chapel bell rope, the first clatter of wheels over cobblestones. But inside it's still quiet. It's peaceful. Your apprentice, your successor, begins preparing the next batch. Oat cakes. He mixes the batter without measuring. That would have bothered you once. Now you don't mind. He's tasting as he goes, testing the consistency with his fingers. That's how you know he's learned. The flour tells you more than the scale. You remember the first time you handed him the peel. He dropped it, panicked, nearly knocked the proofing bowl into the fire, and now look at him working like someone who's been doing this his whole life. Maybe he has. You hear him say something, you blink. What I said, I think we should do a second batch of oat today. The butcher's boy said they sold out by evening yesterday. You nod, then make a second batch. He hesitates. Are you sure you'd usually I'm not baking today, you interrupt. You are. Make the call. He grins, then sets to work. You walk outside, stretching your legs, feeling the stiffness that's taken root in your knees over the years. The morning air is crisp, the sky a soft blue cloud still lingering on the horizon like yesterday's thoughts. You lean against the door frame watching the street. Old Bran the Cooper walks by, gives you a nod. You nod back. Letting the boy do it today, he asks. Letting the baker do it, you reply. Bran chuckles. About time. You think so too. Back inside, the oatcakes are nearly done. He's brushed them with oil and dusted them with flour, just enough to make them brown properly. You notice he's made them thinner this time. Interesting. Trying something new, you ask. Thinner bakes faster, he says, and they crisp better. People like crisp. You don't correct him. 'Cause he's right. The first round of barley wheels come out of the oven. He lines them on the rack carefully. You step closer, tear one open. The steam rolls out, fragrant and rich. The crumb is tight, moist, well-structured. You chew slowly. It's good, you say. He looks at you, eyes shining. Really needs more salt. His face falls, but it's good. He grins. He slices one for himself. You eat together in silence, bread and butter. No need for anything else. After breakfast, you sit by the window while he preps the herb rounders. A newer recipe. His recipe. You didn't teach him this one. He learned it on his own from watching a spice merchant and reading an old scroll someone brought through the village one autumn. He adds rosemary, caraway, a pinch of lemon zest dried and saved from last market day. The loaves smell like memory and something just barely new. You lean your head back and close your eyes, just for a while. When you open them, the second batch is already out of the oven, stacked, wrapped, resting. The bakery is full of bread, of warmth, of quiet pride. You stand, stretch. He hands you a loaf. For supper, he says. You take it. Thank you. No, he replies. Thank you. You walk to the door. The sun is high now, the street busy. You see customers approaching, drawn by the smell, the warmth, the rhythm that's been kept alive another day. And not by you, by him. You turn back, keep the fire low till noon, you say, and save one of those herb rounds for the old tanner's wife. He nods. Got it. You step outside. Not because you're leaving, but because you can. He's ready. And maybe finally so are you. The light outside fades into a dusky gold, casting long shadows across the cobbled streets and the dusty wood floor of the bakery. The air after days of rain is finally clear, and the smell wafting from your oven isn't just bread. It's something more, something comforting, familiar. A scent soaked in memory, rye, ash, warmth and patience. Inside your apprentice, no, not apprentice. Your baker is removing the final batch of oatcakes from the oven. He handles the peel with confidence now, his arms steady, his hands sure. You're seated nearby, wiping your hands slowly with a flour-streaked cloth, watching without interfering. You haven't touched the dough once today, not even to test the sponge, and still the bread got made. The shelves filled. The customers smiled. The rhythm held. You're still getting used to this feeling. It's a mix of pride and discomfort. The pride is obvious he's doing it, really doing it. The discomfort comes from years of habits refusing to be laid down easily. Your hands want to move, your fingers itch to rescore a crust or adjust the logs in the fire, but you don't. Because this transition, this gentle shift in roles is something you've prepared for. something you've worked toward. Outside the village begins to quiet. Market day is still 2 mornings away, so there's no rush, no shouting, just the occasional clink of pails at the well, or the bray of a stubborn mule refusing to leave the tavern yard. Children's voices echo in the alleyways, calling out names and nonsense. A mother calls them in for supper. A dog barks once, then goes silent. The baker inside your shop finishes stacking the last loaves. They're beautiful, nothing fancy, but honest and well made. Barley twists dark rye rounds, and a new shape he's trying for the herb buns. He hasn't told you yet, but you see it in the scoring. Subtle, curved. His mark, not yours. He turns to you, wipes his brow. That's the last of it, he says. You nod, then stand slowly. Every joint in your knees reminds you how long you've been at this. But the ache feels less burdensome tonight, like something you're finally being allowed to put down. Wrap them up, you say. The morning crowd will want them fresh. He moves quickly, wrapping each loaf in cloth with care. You watch as he places the loaves in the baskets lined with straw. For years, this was your task. You remember tying knots into the corners of the cloth so they wouldn't slip. You remember organising the stacks by price, by type, by warmth. You remember doing it alone. Now he does it with you, and soon without you. Did the priest boy come by, you ask? He nods, picked up the communion rounds, said the thinner bake was perfect. You smirk. Not too robust for the Lord this time. He said it floated in the chalice. You laugh a real laugh. The kind you used to share with Corbin, your old master, years ago when you first burned a flatbread so badly it cracked the peel in half. I still think that boy eats more of the wafers than he delivers, you say. Probably. You walk to the front of the bakery, opening the shutter to let the cool air sweep in. It touches your face gently. The breeze smells faintly of mint and hay. I was thinking, he says behind you. You don't turn, you just wait. We could try splitting the bakes next week. I take 3 days, you take 2, you raise an eyebrow. 2 I'll still need help with the Friday load, he adds quickly. You smile. He's not asking to take over all at once, just a few steps more. Just enough to feel the weight and know if he can carry it. That sounds fair, you say. A long pause. Then, do you think you'll miss it? You finally turn to him. He's standing near the hearth now, leaning against the old oak shelf you built yourself. Arms crossed, still streaked with flour. Miss what you ask. He shrugs. The kneading, the noise, the rush, the heat, the way it all starts before the rest of the world even wakes up. You think about it, and you don't answer right away. Because yes, you'll miss some of it. You'll miss the sound of dough slapping against the bench, the hiss of the first loaf entering the oven. The way the air smells at 4 a.m, half ash, half hope. You'll miss the faces at the stall, the small nods of approval, the look people get when they break open a still warm loaf and steam rushes out. But you won't miss the aching hands. You won't miss the nights where you worried about the flour delivery or the mornings you baked through fever because the village still had to eat. I'll miss the rhythm, you say, but not the weight. He nods. I can carry the weight, he says. You believe him. And more importantly, you want to let him. He glances down. I know I'm not you. I don't bake the way you do. Good. He looks up, startled. You step closer, lay your hand on the table. The village doesn't need another me. They need you. They'll learn your crusts, your timing, your tastes. They'll adapt, just like they did with me, just like they did before me. He seems to let that settle. I made too much dough this morning, he says after a moment. First time number 4th. You grin. Congratulations, you're a real baker now. He laughs. Then you both stand there quiet, watching the loaves cool. In a few minutes you'll blow out the lanterns, bank the fire and lock the door. You'll climb the ladder to the sleeping loft and dream of things you haven't had time to dream of in years because now you have time. and he'll stay below reshaping the bakery in his own quiet way. Not better, not worse. Just new. Just next. The bakery is quieter now, but not because it's empty. Because it's full. Full of bread, full of warmth, full of a rhythm that no longer depends on your hands alone. You sit near the open window, the late afternoon sun brushing the edge of the workbench, with that deep amber hue only seen on the tail end of a long, honest day. Outside, the village drifts through its usual routines, children chasing each other down the lane, a cart rattling past with a squeaky wheel, someone calling out for their goat. But inside, everything moves on without you, and that's a good thing. You sip from a chipped mug of warm cider and watch the baker, your apprentice, but no longer a boy, clean the oven tools with the care of someone who understands that baking doesn't end when the loaves come out. It ends when everything is ready for the next morning. He doesn't look rushed. He doesn't ask questions. He just moves with quiet purpose as you did once. It's been several weeks now since he started taking over the full Thursday bake. Then Friday, then gradually Mondays and Wednesdays too. At first you hovered, not because you didn't trust him, but because it's hard to let go of something that has defined you for so long. But each time you stepped back, he stepped forward. And now he doesn't need you to show him how to score a manchet loaf or balance the fire's temperature by ear. He doesn't need you to measure flour or judge the colour of a crust. He just needs the space to do it his own way, and you've finally learned how to give him that. He glances at you now, catching your eye from across the room. The second batch of rye didn't crack this time, he says. You nod. You let it rise long enough, 35 minutes. You raise your mug in salute. He smiles and gets back to work. There's no need to say more. That's how baking is after a while. Fewer words, more doing, more noticing. Earlier in the day, the butcher's wife came by clutching a bag of carrots and a long list of complaints about her joints and the price of soap. You handed her the rye she likes slightly, underbaked a little chewy in the centre, and she softened. Thanked you. Then glanced at your apprentice. He bakes now, she asked with a raised brow. He does, you replied. Good. You deserve the rest. You do. And yet you're not idle. You still mend the flour sacks, still check the wood pile, still walk to the mill when it's time to fetch the good grind. But your days of waking before the cock crows and labouring until long after the village sleeps, those days are fading. Now you spend more time listening to the bread as it crackles while cooling, listening to the boy turned baker as he hums while scoring loaves, tuneless but confident. Listening to your own breath, even and slow, no longer chasing the tick of the clock. It's strange, this stillness, but not empty. You look around the bakehouse and everywhere you turn you see echoes. The peel leaning against the corner, your old one, with the scorch mark from the winter fire that went too high. The bench worn smooth by your hands. The wooden spoons still wrapped with the old red thread Corbin your master tied there on his last day. And now among these old things, new things begin to appear. A second proofing shelf, added by your apprentice after noticing the morning rush, could be handled better with more space. A list of custom orders nailed beside the pantry door, his idea. A jar of ground fennel donated by the spice seller's daughter, because he's the only one who knew what to do with it. The bakery is growing without growing, changing but not losing itself, and maybe that's the best kind of change. You push yourself up, slowly stretching the stiffness from your spine, and walk over to the cooling racks. There's a batch of sweet oat buns lined up neatly, each topped with a brush of honey and a few sunflower seeds. A new recipe, not yours. You pick one up, tear it open. Steam puffs out gently. The crumb is soft with the faintest hint of lemon. You bite. It's good. Damn good. Yours, you ask, without turning round. First attempt, he replies, drying a tray. They'll ask for these again. I hope so. You nod. You'll need to make them for the spring fair. He turns. You think I'm ready for that? You don't answer right away. You remember your first fare. Lugging trays on your back, walking miles to the neighbouring village, setting up under a crooked tent that flapped in the wind and smelled like wet sheep. You sold out in 3 hours. The barley twists the manchi rounds, even the flat loaves you had wrapped in scrap linen. People came back asking for more, but all you had left was the coin and a pulled muscle in your arm from lifting too much with too little sleep. I do think you're ready, you say finally, but don't bring everything. Pick 3 loaves, the best ones, and be sure to bring a sign. He grins, the kind with paint. Yes, make it simple. What should it say? You pause, think, then say your name. He nods slowly. That's all it needs. No mention of you. No mention of your shop. Because now it's his. That evening, as the loaves are wrapped and the counters wiped clean, you take out your ledger. Not the order book. Not the flour record. The other one. The one with soft leather covers and ink stains in the corners. The one that only you read. You flip to a fresh page and write, "Today I did not bake. Today I ate. Today I watched as someone else's hands shaped what mine once carried." He did not need help. He did not ask for praise. He simply baked. And it was good. You pause, think again, then add, "The oven will outlive me, and I'm no longer afraid of that." You close the book, set it aside, and let the night fall gently around you. The end comes not with a bell or a farewell or any great announcement, but with the steady thump of dough against wood and the sound of fire catching dry kindling in the oven. It's another morning, like the hundreds, thousands you've lived through before, and yet not the same. Because this morning you do not rise first. You do not stoke the fire. You do not taste the sponge to test its tang. You do not kneel beside the flour sack to measure the weight in your palms. Instead, you wake slowly with the warm scent of barley and rye already curling through the floorboards, lifting you gently from sleep. The light through the shutter is soft, early golden. Below you, he is already working. You lie there for a while, staring at the old wooden beams above your head, tracing the knots in the timber. You know each one like a constellation. You could name them. You have in the past in your head, on long nights when the baking never seemed to end. But now you simply let your breath settle into the space. There's no hurry, because the bakery is no longer waiting on you. When you finally rise and dress, the smell of bread is stronger, sharper. The rye must be in. You walk down the ladder carefully, slowly, not from pain, but from something else, reverence maybe. Habit transformed into observation. When your feet touch the warm stone floor, you see him at the bench. He doesn't hear you. His back is to you, his sleeves rolled, hands moving over the dough with quiet authority. He's shaping barley loaves now, and you watch the way he tucks and seals the seam, turns the round, scores the top in 3 curved strokes, his signature. The mark is new. He started using it last week. You never ask why. You don't interrupt him. Not yet. Instead, you move to the window. The morning light spills across the bakehouse floor, washing everything in soft gold. The dust dances in the air. The air itself is thick with warmth. Yeast, ash, rosemary, salt. Everything is as it should be. Everything is in its place. He finishes the tray and turns, sees you. "Morning," he says. You nod. "How's the rise?" "Good. I let the sponge go overnight. The fire held." You smile. It always does if you know how to feed it. I learned from the best he says, and he means it. You nod, but you don't answer. You've never liked praise, and besides, it's his now. He earned it. You sit. Watch. He loads the loaves into the oven. His peel is smoother now, worn to his grip. The fire flares briefly as the heat accepts the new batch. You hear the soft thud of dough meeting stone, the hiss of steam, the groan of wood as the door closes. How long, you ask? 20 minutes. Maybe 22. You nod again. He's watching the weather. The flour. the mood of the fire. He knows. He doesn't need a timer. He has instinct. He wipes his hands on a cloth and leans against the bench. "I've been thinking," he says. "Dangerous," you reply, smiling. "About the sign." You raise an eyebrow. "The one over the door." He nods. "I think it's time we carved your name," he says. "Mine's already there. But yours?" He hesitates. "I want people to know it's yours too." You shake your head. "It was mine," you say. "Now it's yours. But you built it, and you're the one who'll carry it forward." He frowns slightly. "I can still be here," you add. "Still help, still teach." But this place, this bakery, should speak in your voice now, not just echo mine. He takes that in, nods, then says quietly, "Then let's carve it together." And so that afternoon, while the last batch cools and the air outside begins to warm with the promise of summer, you take the old sign down. It's heavier than you remember. You both sit on the back stoop with knives and sanding cloth, the wood balanced between your knees. Together you smooth the old edges, flake off the worn lacquer. The original carving, Master Baker, Ewan of Westvale, is still sharp but faded. Beneath it he begins to carve, Orrin Baker of Westvale, not Master, not yet. But he doesn't need the title. The bread speaks for him. You guide his hand once on the curve of the O, but only once. The rest he does alone. When it's done, you hold it together. He oils it with a cloth. You inspect it for splinters. Then as the sun begins to set and the village hums with evening song, you both walk to the door and hang it up. No one claps. There is no ceremony. But somehow that moment feels bigger than a dozen festivals. You step back, look at it, then look at him. "You ready?" you ask. He nods. "Are you?" You consider the question. You think of the early days, the long nights, the lean years. You think of your first sponge, your first fire, your first loaf that split open wrong, and the first customer who said, "This is the best thing I've eaten all year." You think of Corbin. You think of yourself. You think of what it means to hand over a legacy not as a burden but as a gift, and you say yes. That night you return to your ledger one last time. You open to a clean page. You write. The name above the door has changed. The hands at the bench are not mine. The fire still burns. The loaves still rise. The village still eats, and I am still here. But now I am not the baker. I am the keeper of memory and the witness of what comes next. You pause, then add, "The oven is in good hands. The bread is safe." The story continues. You set down the pen, close the book, step into the quiet evening air, and for the first time in your life you walk away from the bakery with nothing to carry. No sack, no tray, no worry. Just the knowledge that you built something that will outlive your hands. And that is a start.